Hello, everybody. We're back. Joining now is back for the fall season. This is our official kickoff show. What a way to do so. We're doing some late night news. Hi, Anita. Anita's here. Hello, Anita. Nice to see you.
Hey,
Uh,
Anita.
as you can tell, my normal co-anchor is not here tonight, but I wrangled in somebody who knows a little bit about the subject matter that we're going to be talking about tonight. Why don't you, for those who live under several rocks and 400 feet of gravel, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, mystery guest.
Oh, I just show up and call shit. I've done my job. I can leave now. So, I'm Jim Nettles. I do yes. I mean, I write science fiction, urban fantasy, horror, a bit of this, that, and the other. A whole lot of nonfiction stuff. A whole lot of business stuff. Of course, I don't have a copy of the business book with the AI shit in it, handy because I'm up on the mountain at the moment. I've worked in tech for a very long time. I deal with a lot of stuff with IP. And if I don't make you at least somewhat unhappy somewhere in this conversation, I've missed something because I'm probably going to piss everybody off before we're done.
All right. Well, before we get to that, let's talk about the matter at hand. This is gonna be a long diatribe, and then we'll get Jim's thoughts on this as we go along. But if you don't know, I'm pretty sure that most of our audience does know this. But at this point, NaNoWriMo is kind of stuck its finger in a hole again, and kind of done some stuff. And so we're going to talk about that tonight. And you may recall that we did a story back in April about NaNoWriMo, the leadership being in upheaval over some drama concerning a sector of members and organizations and allegations of sexual assault and harassment. Well, last year, if that wasn't enough, the organization decided to say that they accept novels written with the help of AI apps like ChatGPT, but noted that doing so for the entire submission would defeat the purpose of the challenge. This year's post goes further. Their annual post to their members that they do on their board. And something that they mentioned here, we recognize that some members of our community stand staunchly against AI for themselves and that it's perfectly fine. Uh, and then in its latest post, advocating for AI tools, as individuals, we have the freedom to make our own decisions. The post has been lambasted by writers across platforms like X and Reddit, who, like many creatives, believe that generative AI tools are exploitative and devalue human art. Many disabled writers also criticize this statement for inferring that they need generative AI tools to write effectively. In a statement posted on their community board, Zendesk, Zendesk, NaNoWriMo's mission, this is their statement. It is NaNoWriMo neither explicitly supports nor condemns any approach to writing, including the use of tools that leverage AI. We recognize that harm has been done to the writing and creative communities at the hands of the bad actors in the generative AI space, and that the ethical questions and risks posed by some aspects of technology are real. The fact that AI is a large, complex technology category which encompasses both non generative and generative AI applied in a range of ways to a range of uses contributes to our belief that AI is simply too big and too varied to categorically support or condemn. NaNoWriMo's mission is to provide structure, community, and encouragement to help people use their voices to achieve creative goals, and build new worlds on and off the page. We fulfill our mission by supporting humans doing the writing. Please see this related post that speaks to our overall position on non discrimination with the respect to approaches to creativity, writing resources, and personal choice. This is the post that they're referring to. This is a note to their members. I don't want to read this whole thing, but basically, it's saying that the debates about AI on the social media have become vitriolic. It was clear that intimidation and harassment we witnessed were causing harm to our community of writers. So the fact we created last week were written to curtail those behaviors. So basically, instead of backing off, they doubled down, and their mission is to cheer on and provide authors, as they say, and members of their communities with questions and concerns that go beyond the general context for their comments. We don't think we can address all of these in a single communication. Additional context is here in a very small team. Basically, they're saying they've lost some members over this, and also they've lost some board members. 4 board members resigned as part of this initiative, um, and they are Daniel Jose Older, a fantasy writer, Cass Moss, Cass Morris. I apologize. C.L. Polk and Janae May. And all of them had various roles in NaNoWriMo, the NaNoWriMo community, various board member roles, and all of them resigned as a result of this. Uh, um, and then Anita says NaNoWriMo has lost any sense whatsoever. All right, Jim. So talk to us a little bit about this. Where did they go wrong in your opinion here? Because I know you have strong opinions about the use of AI, and so we'll talk about that. But where do you think NaNoWriMo really got the bed here?
So I want to actually start with uh, one's on the positive side of NaNoWriMo. So this is where I want to actually start and set the baseline. So, NaNoWriMo, 25 years, really has had a really material impact and has in a lot of ways grown up with the growth of the indie publishing industry, technologies that have really enabled a lot of people to find, develop, and establish their careers. We've seen a lot of really strong, great works come out of Nano. And so when we look at the premise behind NaNoWriMo, that notion of can you crank out 50,000 words in a month? Now, if you've never written a book or a novel, or you've never sat down and tried to be productive, either that sounds like an arduous hill to climb, or you're like, how hard can that be?
Mhm.
And the answer is it's achievable. And that's the thing, is it's achievable, but it's work.
Mhm.
And I think that if we look at the goals of Nano as they've been stated for a long time, it really is to inspire creativity, inspire people to come out the gate and try to climb that hill, right? To find out what does it really take, put that challenge on. And they use a lot of the tools of gamification, reward systems, and most importantly to me, community, to
Mhm.
help encourage and create networks by which creators can find their feet, find their communities. And I mean, I've used Nano as a Kickstarter in, a lot of years for the whole, I need a project, or I've been running wide open on other things. It's like, okay, it's Nano's here. All right, let me use this as a Kickstarter to kind of game myself, right?
Right.
And if we look at the sponsors, the major sponsors for Nano and everybody that has been backing this for so long, because a lot of careers have been created or at least supported because of Nano, right? We
Right.
look at things like Pro Writing Aid, which is one of the big troublesome sponsors right now, right? This
Right.
is where there's a bunch of questions, you know, liter- uh, literature and latte. If we look at Scrivener's not necessarily come out with their entire leaning on generative AI technology. I'm
Well, they
going
lost Ellipsis. Ellipsis quit
well, yeah.
because of this.
That's actually one of the pieces I want to talk about is Ellipsis,
Mhm.
where they fit in the marketplace and everything else. So if we look at all the technologies that have come to Nano and said, "Hey, we want to partner with you. We want to be part of this universe." I think that that's been hugely important because it creates a lot of that sort of credibility both ways, right?
Mhm.
If Nano says, "Yes, we'd love to have you a sponsor," we're creating that relationship. We're passing on a little bit of that credibility that, Nano backs you as a sponsor. We appreciate your sponsorship, but we also endorse it. That's a big piece of it. The
Mhm.
other way, which is if you're a technology like Pro Writing Aid or Scrivener, one of these, coming in and saying, "Hey, we provide these tool sets, and we find value in NaNoWriMo," right?
Mhm.
That's also a big endorsement, and these are long, valuable partnerships. Now, Ellipsis is kind of an interesting situation. where their technology, they have ardently come out and said, we will never use generative AI.
Yeah.
This is where the tech person in me says that that is an extraordinarily dangerous stance for them to take. Because at this point, and again, we all, if you've never heard my rants about the technology, what generative AI, what it's not, the problems with how it's trained, because again, my biggest challenges with generative AI are generally how these models have been trained and an
Mm-hmm.
infringement on IP.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we exempt all of that, right? Let's just put that to the side because that's irrelevant for this conversation. Ellipsis came in and they've said, look, we will never use these technologies as a part of our technology. That's a dangerous thing to say. Never say never. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of reasons for that. And we'll talk about the risk of that. But I give them a lot of credibility here as well, because they're coming out and saying your brand now doesn't represent what we believe in and sponsor.
Right.
That willingness to walk away and say, we are a technology here to encourage creativity. So if I look at the messaging that Nano has come out with, there are elements to which I agree. And yes, I'm drinking a beer because I'm still trying to get my liver to decompress after Dragon Con last weekend, and it's all Joe's fault. He drugged me places.
Well, Deborah says that Nano has helped many authors. They've also lost many in years. And Sean says hello. Hello, Sean.
Hey, Sean. Hey, Deb. So if we look at what Nano was founded for, this idea of giving goals, giving stretches, all the rest of these things, the message that they kind of also came out with was a notion of, hey, look, we recognize that for some people, these technologies are assistive.
Yeah.
And a year ago this time, there was a tremendous move from publishers going and saying, if you send me AI stuff, basically you're killing your career.
Yeah.
There's still some truth to that. But just last week at Dragon, there were publishers I was sitting around with that have lessened that stance. There's a number of reasons for that, because one of the things I warned about a year ago with that stance was, how do you define generative AI?
Mm.
And so and I'm going to come back to some of this positive side, or we're going to go down that path. But on this positive side, one of the things that they said was, we recognize that these tools can help people who are, have certain types of physical disabilities, writing problems, things like this. The intention was to come out and say, look, we don't want to cast an opinion either way, from the aspects of saying, you know, um, we don't want to go and discourage people from using tools that they need to use.
Mm.
So, for example, if you've been using Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid, you've been using an assistive generative AI technology for years. Spell check, all of these things are early version generative AI. And as we've now seen, Microsoft Suite, so many tools are now fully integrated. Google, whatever platform you want to go to, are heavily now integrated with these tools and technologies, despite the fact that the lawsuits have not been settled. But the
Okay.
truth of it is, now we're in a world where generative AI is plugged into your light switch.
Okay. That's all well and good. I'm gonna
Now,
play a little. I'm gonna play a little devil's advocate here for
yep.
you a little bit. Um, that's all well and good, and I agree with all that. I think there is certainly something to be said for any tools that manage to help you get your goal creatively. Should be encouraged and utilized, or at least not be discouraged and shit upon, for lack of a better term. But where I think the problem lies with the logic that is being presented by Nano is they're not defining that readily enough. They're not narrowing the scope of it. What they're basically saying is, however you get 50,000 words, we're going to hug you no matter what. And as
Yep.
well as I do, that a lot of this technology is abused. A lot of
Mhm.
it is opportunity. I don't know what you get out of writing
So
50,000 words in AI and presenting it. I mean, what you get a piece of paper from NaNoWriMo, yay, you did 50,000 words. I don't know what the benefit for those people would be, other than maybe after the fact and they go out and publish it, right? But I it it I think that that's where the line is. It has to be drawn. Is they have to. I think they're so afraid. They're like a doctor's office, right? They're so afraid of getting sued for taking a stance that they take no stance whatsoever and just say, "Hey, whatever you do to get 50,000 words is." It's because for them that's the caveat, but for us as artists, the 50,000 words is a luxury. That's the cherry on the sundae. The whole premise of Nano, in my personal purview, is that it is to get you into a rhythm, it's to get you into a function, it's to get you into writing for purpose and doing that. And the 50,000 words doesn't matter in that respect. I think a lot of people go for that, and I think over the years it's gotten a lot more inflated and a lot more competitive with that aspect of it. But it really is never about that. It is just to get you started writing and get you on a proper path. And I think Nano's kind of lost its way and forgotten that as well.
Well, that's exactly the point I was trying to make by that setup, right? Is where did Nano come from versus where we at now?
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at some of these technologies, and it's kind of where I was headed, is we have to acknowledge now that you cannot fully separate from these technologies.
Yeah.
Now, here's the other side of this, and this is where I have the biggest challenge, and then we can talk about some of the other knock-on effects, right?
Mhm.
And I think we talked about this some last
Mhm.
weekend
Yeah.
at 3 in the morning in a rave, but or wherever we were.
Yeah.
There were pretty colors and loud music. So the other side of it is this. If you look at the notion of creative spirit and creative business, the importance of Nano and the importance of accomplishment really is, what do you learn and what do you develop?
Mm. Yeah.
I actually talked about this. I was on a panel with educators looking at the challenge of using these technologies in education and the fact that these kids are using these tools, and they're like, well, should we let them just use them? And I said, here's the main point here. We talk about in writing, you can't break rules until you know what they are, right? If you're going to
Yeah.
use these as assistive technologies, you need to understand the fundamentals. And one of the biggest problems that I see is these technologies are now taking people to skip past understanding the fundamentals and understanding why. And that way, when they have a product at the end of it, they don't know why it's garbage.
Yeah.
And so that's the first biggest thing. If
Yeah.
I'm going to use an assistive technology, if it's going to accelerate me through that process, but I'm using it consciously, regardless of all the other ethical implications. If I'm using it consciously because I'm using it as an accelerator to do something specifically or test things out or to do things that really are generic and standard. For example, let's say you're working on your outline for a book. To go in and hit ChatGPT and say, give me an outline for a 50,000 word novel with this as a setup. Well, the truth of it is, it's going to go scrape and use that repository to go say, here is the standard generic model.
Yeah.
It's a starting point. And if you don't know where you're headed, or you don't know what you're doing, or you're stuck, that can be an assisted technology. Now, what that shows you is, where was I? Where was I going right? Where was I going wrong? It gives you something to work from. The downside of using something like that is you then don't do the research to figure out, why is that structure.
Mm.
You don't do the work. Part of the purpose of
Mhm.
Nano and anything like this is to encourage you to go do the work to develop skills,
Yep.
to develop knowledge, to develop that feel and that flavor. And so when you see people, and you know how I feel about this because I've been blacklisted on so many of them, the guy that runs out and says, oh no, we're going to teach you how to write your book that you can copyright, and you'll be done in 2 hours on ChatGPT, including having your cover from here, and it's your book you can copyright, all of which is an outright bullshit lie.
Yeah.
And that's the kindest way I can put it, because I have a longer rant than that. because again, if you use these tools, and because I can't tell you how many times I've had people look at me and go, well, I'm not a writer. Okay. If you go and you say you're not a writer, but you want a book, okay,
Yeah.
that's like going and saying, I want to cook, so I'm going to go throw a TV dinner in the microwave. You had no real input into it other than selecting what was on the shelf. You threw it in and you picked at what point it was heated up. And then you took that plastic piece of garbage and shoved it in your body. Um, and so when I look at exercises like Nano, these should be things that encourage creativity. These are
Mhm.
things that should be encouraging you to use that community to learn skills, to learn craft, to learn ideas, to
Mhm.
bang things around in that community to say, how would you approach this? I'm thinking this through. Instead, what's happening is this is shortcutting. So, in so many ways, what this is doing is that's looking at the purpose of Nano or looking at the purpose of creativity and skipping to the end product.
Mhm. You know, the other thing I would add to that is the sense of wonderment, the sense of adventure, the sense
Hmm.
that you get when you decide you're going to sit down and write something, right? It's that first initial. I mean, a lot of us don't remember it because it's been so long ago since we had that first time, but it is that first moment when you realize you could do this and make it work, and that kind of goes, away if you're just clinically producing words for the purpose of producing words, and it doesn't have that same oomph to it, right? It doesn't have that gravitas that makes you feel like you're doing something creatively that maybe you could do as a job too, that kind of idea.
Yeah, I mean, all of this is about, I mean, the notion of Nano, because I know a lot of people that go and they're like, all right, I'm going to slam my way through Nano, have 50,000 words, and on December the 1st, I'm going to submit my manuscript to publishers.
Yeah.
Please do not do that, you
Yeah.
know, or I'm going to have the AI come get you. Um, because again, even if you've been through Nano and you wrote it originally, it's not ready.
Yeah.
And if you go use one of these assistive tools, it's really not ready.
Mhm.
But and I'm trying to be kind as I refer to them as assistive tools without being the total jackass that wants to come out.
Yeah.
But again, one of the things because, and I'm going to say this on a much wider scale beyond Nano. One of the problems we see now is we want it fast. We want the shortcut.
Yeah.
And the problem is when you shortcut things, if you don't, again, I'm going back to that notion of if you don't know what you're doing, you don't know why you're doing it. Well, then if you shortcut it, you don't know if you went the right way.
Right.
You don't know what side trips you missed. You don't know what you didn't experience, right?
Right.
And because that notion of even if you are an absolute plotter and you outline everything to the nth degree, you're going to have that moment somewhere in the middle of a story where a character looks at you and says, I wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
Because, oh, I've spent a half a book with you getting along. I wouldn't do that. What the hell do you think you're doing?
Yeah.
Right. And so if you're thinking that you're going to use these tools and it's just going to crank something out for you, what are you accomplishing? What's the reward for? Right?
Yeah.
What's the dopamine hit?
Yeah.
What is what is the piece that you carry out and show to people?
Yeah. And
Eh,
why does Nano have to be the center point for that? You could do that anytime you want. You don't have to
Absolutely.
do it in November. I don't. There's just I don't know if there's prestige with that or not, but I just feel like that's not a selling point for people who
Mhm.
are utilizing Chat GPT in that manner. Ania says AI tools used to assist writing is one thing, but their stance allowed for AI actually writing the book, which defeats the purpose of doing Nano. I agree, Anita. It would
Mhm.
defeat the purpose. Writers get better by writing. There's no shortcut to that. And the sense of accomplishment, I think Anita was adding on to what I
Eh,
was talking about.
Well, let me actually and go back to the sense of accomplishment for a
Hmm.
minute, because this to me is one of the biggest things. I will go back to when I was a kid. I've written articles about this. I've done shows about this. I remember when I was a kid, for Christmas one year, I got an aeronautics kit, right? About
Yeah.
yay by yay. And it had in there building various stages of like airplanes and stuff to get up to the model rocket, right?
Yeah.
Well, being the fact that, all right, I want to go straight to the model rocket. Well, the kit is designed to carry you through, fold the paper airplane, do the balsa airplane, do this, do this. It's learning to build those skills and build those steps to get you up to the point where, okay, now I can go set the rocket off.
Yeah.
Well, great. I didn't have the skills, but I went and blew up the rocket. Um, Patience is not always my strongest suit.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I have learned in life is that joy of exploration, the joy of the journey.
Hmm.
And one of the things I see, because again, I've done this with some of the kids I do stuff with and mentor and whatnot. It's all about how do I go faster? How do I go this? How do I go this? That's not what creativity is for.
No.
Creativity is about experience and bringing that into the world,
Yeah.
right? And so that sense of accomplishment comes from what did I learn? What did I do? What did I develop? And one of the things that we're seeing a lot of, and we're seeing a crash in, honestly, is there was this massive influx of people that were cranking out books, throwing them into KU, throwing them up on Amazon. Nothing would happen other than the fact it created a glut. And all of a sudden, Amazon's going and saying, wait, there's a ton of garbage chunking up everything, including tying up our algorithm. We don't
Yeah.
know what to do. We don't know who to market to.
Yeah.
This is all garbage. And it impacted writers. It impacted readers because readers went into a state of assuming everything, unless they knew who it was or they saw this person's been writing for 15 years, they assumed it was AI generated garbage. So if
Hmm.
you're trying to launch a career and do it the hard way and do it to get that sense of accomplishment, so many people have destroyed careers because, oh, well, I cranked it out fast and easy, but you didn't actually create anything,
Hmm.
and have discovered that all of a sudden they get trashed. They got a bunch of 1 stars. They've got, if anybody read it or bought it at all. And so companies are now coming in and saying, we want to see the quality. When I look at trying to hire people, because again, based on the different things that I do and the questions I ask in which modality, if you don't have a certain level of understanding, even as we stand right now, in a lot of spaces, that's going to hold you back.
Yeah.
At the same time, if I want you to do certain other things, I want you to know enough to be able to tell me why you would or wouldn't use these tools
Yeah.
and how they're impacting you. And one of the big challenges right now is still we have an ardent line down the middle of either it's all fine, it doesn't matter what I do with AI, or we have the other side, which is no AI at all. And the
Yeah.
truth of it is, neither of those is acceptable. I'm
Yeah.
going to say that the lane by which we see that these things are part of life, part of business, part of creativity, that lane is widened, but that lane's been there for 15 years. Just most people didn't know that that's what they were doing in a lot of cases.
Hmm.
So when I look at it, the big challenge is this: going back to Nano, what is it that I want to get out of the experience of Nano? And if it is, I want to say I created 50,000 words, then go create the 50,000 words. If you just want to use AI to do it, then type 50,000 random words on a piece of paper,
Yeah.
because there's
Yeah.
fundamentally no real difference.
That's the thing that is really baffling to me about the way that Nano is doubling down a little bit and being so strong arm about it. Uh, they're the most innocuous aspect of this you could possibly ask for. I mean, they don't. They're what they do has no monetary value. Has no. I mean, ultimately, it might lead to that, but it doesn't have it by just putting 50,000 words down. It I think a lot of ways Nano's lost its own way in that it's in what it's
Nano's lost its
about.
purpose.
Yeah. Um, and Deborah says your first book sells your next book, so it needs to be a good one. You
Yeah.
only have the first read from a reader once.
Yeah.
And Sean says, I remember when I began working for a web design company that used Dreamweaver, most of our programmers weren't. And the code Dreamweaver created was a terrible code, but it was easier to create websites.
Yeah. So if I look at all of this, if I really break it down and say where are we at, um, Nano's messaging and what came out, which was basically a, hey, we're not going to make any judgment calls because we don't want to make a judgment call,
Yeah.
is to me really the standard of, I'm going to use the bad old trope of, if you stand for nothing, or if you try to stand for everything and say everything's okay, you stand for nothing, and you have no point. You
Yeah.
have no purpose. You
Yeah,
have
it's
no
like going to the doctor's office and asking the doctor, well, what's my chance of recovery? Well, 50-50. It's like, but you're not really telling me anything, because, well, I can't really by law tell you anything because I'll get sued. And then I think Nano's so afraid of its own shadow at this point, right? And that's kind of where, and then Anita says Nano lost everything. They're just a mess now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yes.
that that is a good point, Sean. That
Hmm.
they use the words classist and ableist, and
They threw around tropes to make everybody feel guilty, and
mhm,
realistically, to me, that was the point when they lost whatever credibility they had left.
yeah,
That was, we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings or tell anybody you're not doing it right, because on one stand, we've said with Nano for years, there's no right or wrong. There's just go do it. Now
yeah.
we're telling people you don't even have to do it anymore.
And again, okay. So here's the other two things that I think are weird about this, right? If Nano had said nothing about AI, if they had
Hmm.
just let it all be, right, and never said a word, none of this would have ever mattered. And the other thing about it is, if Nano is driven, or is supposed to be driven by the community standards of the community. It's supposed to develop a writing group, a writing community, and if you are within that writing group, writing your 50,000 words with AI, doing it AI wise, I think the people in the group would set you straight if that's the purpose of which
If
is
you
what
have
they
a healthy community and a
well,
community group.
well, that's what they say, that their mission statement is to build a community of writers that write, and that's just like, well, why?
But this to me goes back to look at some of the other issues you were raising as we got started with things that have gone on in different Nano communities.
Hmm.
The number of people I know that were leaders in local and regional Nano groups, had the leadership, had the structure, that went and said, this isn't for me anymore,
Yeah,
and have walked away. This is, this really to me
this is the
is that
straw that broke the camel's back, right?
yeah. So unfortunately, I think that the critical path here is that, I think for those people that are left that have been around a long time that really appreciated the mission, I think this
Mhm.
is going to be the thing that a lot of them look at, throw their hands in the air, and go,
Yeah,
"This is just another toxic shithole."
yeah. Sean says, if you're going to invoke class warfare, you better know your Hegelian dialect.
Hegelian dialectic, yeah. And yeah, I have a number of other rants that tie specifically to that, but that's not the purpose of this show. So, I
No.
mean,
Well,
again,
let me
having been yeah, go ahead.
Well, let me ask you this. I think we've probably exhausted this. We all believe that Nano's kind of pretty much on its last legs. The way they treated the municipal liaisons last year, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
that was all part of what we talked about in April. And I actually interviewed a liaison who left the group, and talked about that. If you want to see that show, we did that in April. And you can go watch that show. It's up there. Like, you just go to the late night news playlist and you'll find it. Um, I think we've pretty much exhausted the idea. Nano's on its last leg. Its purpose is lost. It's trying to it's trying to hold on to that last gasp. It's there for the death rattle, and it's holding on for dear life, and it doesn't know how to do that right. The people involved with it just have mishandled this from the beginning, and torched it. So let me ask you this, because this is going to come up it's already come up in several conversations about several other companies, Adobe, other places. What, in your personal opinion, for IP purposes and for AI purposes, is the right way to engage your clientele to kind of soften the idea that, hey, look, we're in this world now, and this is going to become part of your world. This, is it being fully transparent? Is it being tethering? Is it softening the blow a little bit? Is there a certain approach that you feel like could enable the idea that we might end up being okay with all this in the end of the day?
So the short version of it is we're still just really in the public infancy of so many of these technologies, right? So I want to come back and talk about Adobe specifically in a minute, but there's a couple. Before we talk about the technology itself, I actually want to talk about one other thing that really does affect this nano situation.
Okay, yeah, please.
And this is that let's look at all of kind of the traditional organizations that have supported writing and are having a variety of implosions, right?
Right.
RWA spectacularly exploded.
The Hugo Awards.
Hugo Awards, the latest blow up around SIFWA, right? I
Hmm.
mean, is SIFWA still there? The discussion about where SIFWA land, NaNoWriMo. If we look at traditional kind of organizations, whether they're trade organizations, civic organizations, all the rest of this, all of them are struggling and having a lot of problems,
Yeah,
which I think is reflective of where we are at culturally.
yeah,
And the reason this becomes a big problem is we got a lot of people that do not know how to interact with people,
yeah,
period. They that don't know how to lead. They don't know how to contribute back. Um, and it's become a thing of let's burn everything to the ground,
yeah,
not let's change it, let's fix it, let's go in. There are times that things need to be burned to the ground. You can't necessarily fix them, or you can fix anything. It just may not be worth the level of effort, right?
right,
I've been involved in some of those things in organizations where it was yeah, I'm out, I'm done. Y'all have fun. This is not me anymore. There
yeah,
have been other things where I've been ardently part of. No, this just needs to be torn apart. And with that notion of looking at organizations, one of the things I think we have to question is why are we seeing so many problems with the leadership in these kinds of organizations that then present these kinds of messages? Is that because they don't have a good read on their audience? Is that because they are trying to influence their audience in a way that they didn't buy it? Is it, why is it? So, because we see so many things going on with organizations and communities like this, and this is everything from the local writers group that implodes to these international organizations. And I think one of the question becomes, why are we seeing so many of them implode, and why are we seeing this? Because is it because we're seeing people get into leadership that are putting their own agendas ahead of the purpose of the organization?
mm. There's a lot of that, I think, but I also think that um, I don't think people understand power either,
Mm,
as much as they understand interaction. Power, once you get to a certain level, there's just certain things that are hidden from the general public that you know you either become a part of the process or the circle, or the process and the circle eat you alive.
mhm.
And I think, and I'm not excusing anybody who utilizes that power for the ways that they're doing it, and I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that power corrupts, right? And
Mhm.
and and also I think there is this need for these organizations to hold on to these archaic, horrible values that they've had for generations that had never been called out for until now. And we're finally to a point where we're all kind of blending together and we're allowing these old ideals and these old thoughts to go away, and the power structure is trying to hold on to those for dear life, and they don't know what to do to pivot. They don't know how to compromise as much as the audience doesn't know how to compromise as well. And I think that's a clash, right?
Right.
And then that's what happens, right? These things implode.
And I mean, again, to steer an organization even the size of NaNoWriMo, right? This is not not a for profit. Some people are making money, making influence, and all the rest of that. But what happens and what I've seen is a lot of, yes, you may have these ideas and ideals, things were started with, but again, usually what it boils down to is who is it behind the scenes,
Hmm.
and that's really the key of what we're seeing is instead of guiding those people behind the scenes to really be able to do things, usually there's a handful of people with all the control and a lot of people that are trying to steer and influence in 27 different directions as to what their own idea of the good path is. And the reason I bring this up is because I think it's important with these organizations, but I think it's just as true with these technologies.
Hmm.
So let's talk about Adobe, right?
Hmm.
There's a there's a lot of slapback coming out because Adobe came and said, "Hey, great, we've integrated AI into all of our tools, and by the way, when you're using them, you're going to use them to train our systems to be better." Now, the technology person in me says that makes sense
Yeah.
because that's how technology works. We look at how you use the systems and we use that to make them ostensibly better or create new products, respond to the market, you know, go and innovate, right? That's the first way. But the big problem is when you're using these LLMs, when you're using um, when you're using design algorithms, things along these lines, if you're going and saying to use what is an industry standard tool, we're going to consume your IP, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And if I'm not going to give you an option to opt out of that, then you've got to start looking at other tools. But the challenge again is the entire industry has been taken over by it. And to go back to one of your original questions about what does this mean for IP? And the short answer is we don't really know.
Yeah.
Um, so on one
Well,
hand, does this mean that if I am going to allow you to use my IP to train your system, I should get residuals? Does this mean that I forfeited some portion of my IP rights? Does this mean, what does it mean? We don't know because it hasn't been through the courts yet.
yeah.
And
And when it does, it's gonna be this massive, massive craziness. I think the thing about Adobe that is so frustrating is it's appealing to its lowest common denominator. The people that don't actually use Adobe for the purpose of using Adobe, it's the people who criminally use Adobe for the purpose of criminally committing acts that and Adobe acknowledging that aspect of it is in itself a criminal act in terms of the idea that they didn't word it correctly, right? They didn't spend enough time to understand that they didn't understand that we understand about IP and that we know what our worth is, right? And I think that's where they misstepped a little bit.
oh, I think it was more than a little bit. But I
Yeah,
think at the other side of that spectrum, they looked and said, "Well, we're the industry standard for so much of this,
yeah,
and your
but
major alternatives are
but
doing
they're
the same
not.
thing too." Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, we've seen plenty of industry standard tools fail and fade away.
Yeah,
And looking at that, one of the things I'm going to say now is as because we've got a couple of things, right? Going back to that notion of I just want it done, I want it fast, and I don't want to have to deal with it.
yeah,
I don't care about the IP. I don't care about this other stuff. I
yeah,
just need this done. For example, was on a call the other night because we're working on some stuff and a marketing company we were with trying to work through some stuff. She's actively got ChatGPT up as we're doing stuff, and has now learned to leverage that as such a fundamental tool. I could actually watch the discernment and kind of the cognitive abilities to think through what question do I ask, because
Mm-hmm.
it's become such a reliance on the tool.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to ask me where so many of these things are going, where what we're headed towards is a new lowest common denominator. And those people who really understand their craft, their tools, and everything else, it's actually going to be easier for them to blow past mediocrity.
Well, then you understand why then you have, if that's, I mean, you're very right on that, but you ultimately in turn have to understand why people are holding so tightly and are building that
Mhm.
line to the notion of creativity and holding on to their value as creative entities, right? I mean, that's
100%.
that is the that you know we don't there are artists out here that don't care about how fast it takes us to put something out there. I mean, we would all love to be faster, but there is something to be said for doing it that makes you ultimately faster by design. So, the tools that help us get there quicker is one thing, but to completely dissolve creativity is not going. We're not going to let that happen.
Well, and so I'm going I've used this example a lot lately. It's you've got people that are doing artisan soaps, artisan candles, small run, small batch stuff. There's a cidery just up the road from me here, cheese plant downtown. So if
Hmm.
I've got a choice, there's a ton of people that are like, well, this is fast, it's cheap. I'm going to buy the bulk soap because I don't care. It
Hmm.
works. My wife wants the goat milk soap that is flavored and scented and colors and
Yeah.
cool.
It has the hint of jasmine and yeah.
You you've met her, you understand. Um, but beyond that, I think that what we're seeing is a cultural split between those people that appreciate really the energy that still carries through true creativity
Yeah.
versus mass produced cheap stuff.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back. So at some point, I'll finish this damn book. I was working on chapters for it the other day. Um, but I was talking about the starving artist lie. Where does that motif of the starving artist come from? I've written a bunch of articles on it over the years, and right now I'm working on the 1920s. And was writing the piece because in the 20s there was another spate of, during that next leap of the Industrial Revolution, if you walked into the houses of the wealthy, you had all of this hand done milling work and all these things here. But at the same time, this was the earliest 8 days of being able to mass produce stuff that gave an illusion of elegance or a little bit of that
Hmm.
upscale thing that you could put into your New York apartment. It was
Hmm.
cheap, but it gave it that bit of set dressing to make you feel better, right? It was that thing. It's the difference between going through somebody who is getting the and doing the hand carved mahogany, whatever else, versus the I'm going to run down to the Home Depot and buy the stuff that's milled by the millions of feet a year.
Yeah.
Either one is still better than a blank wall.
Eh.
Either one of them, if you care about those things, right?
Yeah.
But either one of them gives a little bit of something, but it's the quality of it. And I believe that we are seeing again a lot of that resurgence of people. If I'm paying for it, I want quality for that. But again, there's also to me very much that when we create something, whether it's writing a story, whether I'm doing glass work, whether, whatever it is, you're imbuing a little bit of yourself in there as a creator. And I
Sure.
think there is that's that sense that creates that bond, especially between the writer and the reader for the co-creation experience.
But you
Chat
and I,
GPT,
yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
Chat
I'm sorry.
GPT is not going to create that for you, right?
Hmm.
It's going to create that basic level of mediocrity. And if that's what you're happy and comfortable with, to be a moderate level of mediocrity, great.
Hmm.
Then Go sell that to Hollywood. They'll buy anything.
Yeah. Well, not right now, but which is ironic. But you and I are old enough to remember aluminum siding and wood paneling, and how quick it was to put all that stuff up. Right, that was the solution. Make things look like a wood framed house by putting this fake wood paneling up. And now, 25 years later, this is when this stuff is finally deteriorating. We're seeing all the problems with it. The glue that it used is causing cancers. The
Yep.
asbestos, the idea like that, and it's kind of like, okay, you want the shortcut, but you're gonna pay for it in the end. It's going to come back to haunt you if you use it.
Sooner or later.
You know.
It,
The chat is blowing up, so I want to get some of these out here for you. The new tech IP, all AI, all of them so far ahead of any court decisions on anything. I don't see that catching up. And then JD says, "Good point." I think he was referring to what you were saying earlier, Jim. But if you push a prompt enough, you can get very specific results.
mm-hmm.
I have to think that writing to AI would be similar to writing to the critique group. It would then affect your natural author voice. That's one possible effect, Deborah, but you can tween to get something closer to some authors. AI, yeah, I mean, James Patterson's made a living off of that. AI art is pretty and impressive, but if you look at it, it has no underlying generic look. Some would say that, creative MFA writers all sound alike. And then JD says, quality shall always trump quantity. If you push Midjourney or Leonardo, you can get impressive results.
You can get impressive results, but it still lacks that soul.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think everybody who's utilizing these tools has to know that, right? I just
I
feel
don't
like,
think they do.
yeah.
I have met enough people that can't tell the difference. I mean, you and I both have. Yeah, I mean, if you've read a lot, I mean, I can pick it up and go, oh yeah, that's probably X%
Mm-hmm.
written with ChatGPT. I can pick up an image and go, that's got
No,
this
I
feeling.
can pick up a book and tell you when it was. I never read the other book, but I can tell you it was plagiarized.
Hmm.
I mean that it's just certain things you look for, right? So.
And so, but unfortunately, we go back to that notion of for people that have not invested the time and haven't put in the work, they
Mm-hmm.
don't understand what people are seeing or why it's a problem. It's like being a
Mm-hmm.
student, right? You're a student in school, you have ChatGPT crank out your paper and you hand that in. You learn nothing other than maybe how to write a prompt.
Mm-hmm. Jay says, but 2 years ago, AI generated work won a competition. Yeah, they've won a
Absolutely.
few since then too. So.
I was on a panel last week with a publisher everyone on here would know, and the comment was made, well, we're coming to the day where as long as it's good work, I don't necessarily have to care. And I keep saying, but you do if you want to copyright it.
And you do if you have to talk about it, right? I mean, that's the other thing. How do you sell the generic tone? I mean, I don't know. I think part of the thing, and the thing that most writers hate, is the marketing and the talking about it, and I mean, if you're soulless, how do you present it? How do you affront a soul? Is my thought in that,
We've
I don't.
seen plenty of soulless writers, but they're also
Well, I mean, but at least they're genuinely soulless, right? I mean, you
but
know.
if you don't believe in your work, you're not going to spend 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day behind a booth. You're not going to be paneling and talking about it. You're not going to be on doing interviews. You're just going to try to run some ads and hope for the best, right? Because it does not take more than one time. Because I've paneled with people like, oh yeah, ChatGPT is my co-author. And the first time I heard that, I could not resist myself. And I came out with, well, that's bullshit. I'm like, that's like this flying spaghetti monster is your co-pilot. Um, and I shredded them on a panel in front of a room full of people.
Uh-huh.
Um, Not out of malice, but because of, do you hear how ignorant and idiotic if you're sitting next to four people who have spent months to develop a book and you did it in a week using some prompting and a little editing, and the
Yeah.
easiest way to shred somebody is to then pick that up and say, let's do a dramatic reading of the first chapter of your work. and you want to watch people get really uncomfortable really quick.
Yeah, I you know, Deborah says if an author hasn't found their natural writing voice, they use AI. Will they ever find it?
The answer is no, because they don't have one. If you don't exercise the work, you won't ever know who you are as a writer.
Shane Wilson says AI is ultimately very good for those people who want to write a book and don't want to actually do the work.
And I would absolutely disagree. It's not very good. It is moderately adequate.
I think he's trolling the chat there.
Yes, well,
That's bullshit is the right reply, Jim. With translation FML, I had to fix some train wrecks. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
really? You mean Spanish is not the same thing?
um, yeah, ultimately, I mean, the bottom line is that Nano's a dying aspect of a dying tree. You know, holding on to everything it wants to hold on to, and it's doing everything wrong to make that happen if that's their intention, because they can't seem to get out of their own way. And I mean, we'll see. Well, I mean, we'll see what comes of it. She Wilson says, as a teacher of writing, I'm on the front lines out there.
My mother was an English teacher, right? I come from a line of teachers. Written word is, if you do not grasp communication, you don't grasp language. If you don't love language and the interplay with it, you really can't have all the fun with writing, and you don't understand what it is. I mean, it's the difference between I want to be able to put my name on something to say I've done something, and the act of doing it and
Mhm.
the journey. Because again, to me, the act of writing, especially in fiction, but I mean, this is true in a lot of the things that I do, even certain nonfiction, is you're walking along a journey, a spiritual journey. It's a personal growth. It's a personal expression of what are the paths you go down that don't work? What are the things that you learn about your characters that ultimately tell you a lot about yourself and the experience? What are you doing in this process? So I get wanting to do the shortcuts, right? I get it. I understand it. You want it faster. I mean, there's nothing happier than it's release day. Let me push it out the door. Let me feel better.
Yeah.
But that's an empty that to me. And again, I can only speak for myself and for a lot of people I know, but I'm only speaking for myself. If I went and said, I'm going to cheat and use this, that's a hollow, really hollow thing for me to do as a creator and a writer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in the film industry, CGI, there was a time when CGI was the was the mortal enemy, and now I mean, there's hardly any movies that don't
Hmm.
utilize it in somehow, some way. I think we're all going to find a happy medium eventually. I think it's just going to take time, and you know. And Shane says, "I prefer the work. Release days suck."
Yeah.
But I think we're all. I think there's going to be a happy medium at some point, some way where we meet in the middle here, and there's a marriage, whether it lasts or ends in divorce, I don't know, but you know, that's not for me to say. But I do think ultimately, at the
Ultimately,
end of
it's a tool.
yeah,
How we use the tool.
mhm.
We culturally have not yet figured out how to use this sledgehammer.
And then JD says, but every time I see practical effects, it's so refreshing. Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. I find joy in the actual writing. I wouldn't give that up willingly, and I think that's the bottom line. I think none of us would, you know.
And I think that's the
But
difference between a true writer and somebody that just wants to slap their name on something.
yeah, and that's why I think ultimately, as a writer, you should pat yourself on the back, because it's not something everybody can do. Whether they say they can do it or not, they have no idea once until they've done it. And every person that I've seen in the chat has accomplished that feat, and I think that's something that should be applauded. And congratulations to all of you for that. I think that's important. You know.
I mean, to me, there is a part of me that really is sad to see what's happening in Nano, because again, it's done so much good over the years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to declare it dead yet, um, but I'm going
It'll
to
never
say
be the
that
same.
It will never be the same, nor should it,
Mhm.
because again, we're in a world that if this is not the world of 2019.
No.
This is also not the world of 2023 before most people knew this stuff existed,
Yeah.
right? We're not in the same world, and we can't pretend that we are. We can't pretend that these things are here and are not here and are not influencing everything that we do. I mean, it's like I just did the panel on AI and the elections, AI and intellectual property, all these things. This
Hmm.
has thrown a massive wrench at the way everything works.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, again, Sean, I agree. I think that there is a possibility here of groups picking up the message, the mantra, and the
Hmm.
mission of Nano and going forth and saying, no, we're going to give you a challenge.
I think there's an evolution pivot that can be done here, and I think that is we'll see who picks up the ball and runs with it, but I think that's possible, and I think I think I think I agree with everything you said, Jim, and
That's usually not a good idea because I don't
yeah,
usually agree
probably
with
not.
everything I said, but
But that being said, I think I really thank you for being here and talking about this with me and going through this story. This was something that just happened while we were having fun over the weekend, and so I'm glad that we got a chance to sit down and actually have a conversation about it. So thank you so much for that. Tell everybody if they want to get a hold of you and talk more about this and have questions about AI and IP and intellectual property, how they can find out more about that from you and where they can find you, sir.
well, the easiest place to go is jamespnettles.com. From there you can see the books and a lot of the projects I'm doing. If you want to hear the podcast, which will be coming back off a hiatus, in fact, I'm probably doing this as the show when I record on Sundays to talk about this.
Mhm.
Come check out the creatingprose.com, or it's creatingprose.com, my podcast, web show. You can come check out when we do a lot of panel shows and things like this at the Continual Convention or Continual the Con that never ends. Facebook, Twitch, YouTube. You can connect there from my website. If you're interested in some of the business workshops, in fact, I'm getting ready to record the freebie business fundamentals for publishing. I think we're right now negotiating which one we're recording. But right now, there's a freebie workshop out there for me droning on for about 2.5 hours. It's a recording of a workshop I did for a writers group. That's kind of all the business basics of stuff. Out there's a freebie. Joe got to see some of the new toys we're about to launch.
I
Um,
also attended the business workshop in its smaller iteration at Dragon Con. So
and he sat there and he got stuck at the back of the room and couldn't get out. I mean,
that's not true. I did not want to leave. I could have left if I wanted to, but no, I learned quite a bit, as I told you, and that is the God's honest truth. I always absorb when I watch those panels, and I think it's worth it, and I think there's a lot, and there's was some really good questions in that in that room that brought up some really interesting things that I didn't think about before. So
no, but getting to do both those workshops was fantastic at Dragon. We had two packed rooms. Um, you need to get Oriana on as well to come on and talk Kickstarter.
yeah, yeah, we'll do that at some point for sure.
Um,
Yeah, I actually talked to her a little bit about it at the bar at the end of the night. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Well, welcome to the fall season, everybody. We've got lots of programming like this going on all year, all the rest of the year. We're headed toward the end of the year with our fall programming. So come and join us for This Week in Indies on Sunday, where we celebrate the writing troupe, a group that Vanessa Juta created and cultivated by the people that are involved in it. So everybody come and check that out on Sunday at noon Eastern. We're going to talk a lot about writing process in that chat as well. That will be hosted by SM Hillman, and I'll be a panelist for once in my life on This Week in Indies. And then we have the spotlight on the multiverse and lots of other shows going on throughout the week. So just keep you know where to find us and how to get to us. Smash the like button, subscribe, comment, do all those wonderful things. And remember, Jim, do you want to say the magic words?
it's always time to go indie now, and it's
Yeah.
always good to see everybody and hang out a bit.
All right. Bye, everybody.